When Saba Bando's son Zain was born with serious physical disabilities, she looked to principles she had already started to learn about facing fear of the unknown and allowing life to unfold. Saba shares her story and the science of connection and belonging in overcoming fear. Please welcome Saba Bando.
Can you hear me? Okay. When Dale and Cindy asked me to speak on belonging, I knew there were many different things I could discuss with you on the topic. Fear of rejection, fear of not fitting in, fear of missing out. But then I thought of doing something different. So I wanted to talk with you about the importance of belonging to ourselves. I learned how to speak English by watching Mr. Rogers. This is my older sister and I. My family immigrated from Pakistan when I was a year old. My parents felt strongly that my sister and I would learn English eventually, so they would only speak to us in their native language, called Urdu. Our first home was a tiny apartment on the north side of Chicago. My mother would only let us watch Channel 11, and she loves to tell the story about how I would dance around the living room and kiss the TV multiple times whenever Mr. Rogers came on. I would actually tell him I loved him out loud. Thinking back to this and listening to my mom's stories, I realized what a beautiful experience for a little girl, for that to be my first exposure to a new language and a new culture. To hear Mr. Rogers' words over and over, words like this: "You've made this day a special day just by being you. There's no person in the world like you, and I like you just the way you are." In my opinion, this quote gives the simplest definition of belonging, that I am good enough. As I moved through my childhood years, I forgot this message. The societal and cultural messages I was receiving had a lot of influence on me, as they do for many of us. I felt separate from many of my peers growing up in the Chicago suburbs in the 70s and 80s. I was from a different culture, religion, and race. At the same time, I was feeling separate from the culture and religion I was a part of. This wasn't a debilitating feeling, more like an uneasiness that became my normal. Once in college, I became a seeker. I wasn't sure what I was seeking, but was drawn to books about personal development, Eastern philosophy, spirituality, and what would have been termed New Agey in the early 90s. What started as a hobby turned into a deep dive following my son's diagnosis. My son Zan was born at 25 weeks. I was a strict follower when it came to doctors, but there were complications during the pregnancy, and efforts to delay his delivery were unsuccessful. After being flown from Central DuPage Hospital to Lutheran General, Zan was born weighing 1 pound and 12 ounces. He spent his first 3 months in the hospital, where he was intubated and experienced various setbacks. We didn't get to hold him until he was about 5 weeks old. Zan was so tiny that his head to his bottom could fit in my husband's hand. Once we brought him home, he continued to face challenges, and by the age of 1, was unable to move on his own, ate very little, had no language, sick off of the respiratory issues, and cried several hours a day. This was after multiple hours of therapies a week. To put it mildly, I was overwhelmed. After visits to various specialists, we finally had an appointment with one of the top doctors in Chicago. She took one look at Zan, and after what felt like a 2-minute exam, gave her conclusion. "Your son has spastic quadriplegic cerebral palsy," she said. "He will not be able to walk or talk, likely cognitive issues, GI issues, vision and hearing problems. It will be a difficult life. Here's a script for therapy and Valium." Therapy, Valium for me? She didn't appreciate my sarcasm. No for him. And that was the end of the meeting. I was stunned by her words and furious with her callous delivery. In the days and weeks that followed Zan's diagnosis, I kept thinking, how can you predict the trajectory of someone's life at the age of 1? I felt fear of the unknown, fear that what the doctor said was true, fear that I had no idea what I was doing as a new mother as it was, and fear that I didn't know where to turn. I felt alone. My husband, Matt, and I didn't know how to explain what this all meant to our family and friends since we didn't understand it ourselves. At times when I'd be cajoling Zan to eat, to sleep, to stop crying, quotes I had read in the past would pop into my mind, quotes from those new agey books. I turned to those books and found new ones. I got curious. I would listen to books on tape while Zan and I made our usual rounds to see specialists and therapists. I started to put little things into practice, starting with living in the present moment, which really took a lot of practice. Society was giving me the message that my son didn't belong, that his life would be difficult, that our lives would be difficult. But what if we became open to another possibility? What if we don't know what's going to happen? Those books and quotes motivated and inspired me. In order to help explore possibilities for Zan, I had to start meeting him where he was. I needed to parent the child in front of me, not the future version that may emerge. I practiced being mindful, practiced self-compassion and empathy, and savored the wins. We started exploring alternative therapies since the traditional ones were not helping Zan improve. We traveled all over the country and Canada. We learned about different ways to approach and improve his symptoms. Intensive home therapy, energy medicine, craniosacral magnet therapy, the list went on and on. Over the first 6 years of his life, Zan made marked improvements. He could army crawl, roll over, sit with support, speak clearly, he could read, and in good overall health. It was 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Zan got his first power wheelchair when he entered 1st grade. As Zan got older, he would announce big plans. I'm going to be on the radio. I want to be on the football team. I'm going away to college. At these times, I would think I was responding appropriately and was encouraging, but I would feel a catch in my throat. I would wonder, what's this feeling about? I started to bring more awareness to that feeling and got quiet. I realized that I was operating from an unconscious bias. My historical and cultural views of what someone with a disability could do, experience, and strive for were rooted in fear. Fear of failure, wanting to protect him, fear of how these goals would be perceived by the outside world. I was believing the narrative that he didn't belong. That was my stuff, not his. I could choose to let these preconceived notions take over, or I could allow his life to unfold as the universe had intended. This was a big moment for me. Working on myself, shifting my belief system, my awareness and attitude, so I could show up differently for Zan. It had to start with my own sense of belonging. A sense of belonging to yourself gives you the ability to believe and embody this truth. We are all worthy of having hopes and dreams and goals for a happy and fulfilling life. No list of accomplishments required, not a certain amount of money, not a certain GPA, not acceptance into a particular social group, not physical beauty, not physical ability. Your definition of success is unique to you. I wanted Zan to realize his own worthiness within himself and in his family. And if I didn't, how could I expect society to feel he belonged? Did this go smoothly? It didn't. You've probably heard the phrase, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. We struggled. I made bad decisions, got taken advantage of, useless, expensive therapies, skipped doctor's appointments because I didn't want to hear his birth history one more time. I could go on. Zan did experience some of the difficulty the doctor predicted. He had several surgeries followed by long inpatient rehab stays. He experienced lack of belief in his abilities from so-called experts, but he also experienced the opposite. Principals, teachers, coaches, therapists, and doctors who shared our vision and okay with saying, let's see where this kid's life goes. We could also decide where we wanted to put our attention. How will we reframe some of the negative experiences? For example, Zan learned to trust that an incident of social rejection was a temporary feeling, learning to allow yourself to feel the painful emotions coming up and then allowing them to pass through you so you can have clarity to regroup and then start again. The concept of belonging and building resilience needed to work through challenges is a daily choice and a workout of the mind and spirit. The more you build the muscle, the more ease you can find when things get tough. I don't have everything figured out. I've taken risks and failed. I've been discouraged and tired. I've gotten sad that Zan needs to manage a lot more than many of his peers. Here's the thing though, I keep showing up, keep learning, keep problem solving and researching. Belief in my own ability and Zan's belonging, belief in my own belonging and Zan's belonging remind me of our innate worthiness. Like a big floppy cushion that you can fall into, belonging allows us to get grounded again so we can bounce back. I didn't need to learn how to belong. I needed to remember that I always did. It is now part of my mission to guide others who want to remember the same. Thank you.
Saba, that was so good. What a powerful story, and how something that you were called to, I think you call it a hobby at first, and how your real life, called for it, and now you're a personal development coach. So, and I think that's much fun up, because I think if anyone has questions, I do want to say, because my daughter Allie is here, and she knows Zan, and if any of you have had a child at Downers Grove North in the past 5 years, they will say, I know Zan, because he was a sports reporter and just always smile on his face, and everybody knows him, right? Right?
Exactly.
But does anyone have any questions for Saba?
Saba, please share with everyone what Zan is doing right now, where he's at,
Thank you, Melissa. So here's Zan. He's a freshman at University of Illinois in Champaign. He's studying journalism. He is living on his own. He hires and schedules his own personal aid support, and he's adjusting well. And if you recall, he did go on the radio. He was on the football team, so yeah, he's doing good. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Is your husband always on board with all the alternative therapies and thought processes that you're following?
Yes. Fortunately, even if he wasn't necessarily in it with me in the activity, he didn't say no. So I think that he received a lot of, we both did, a lot of friends questioning what we're doing and why we're doing it. So from that perspective, but he eventually got on board.
Anybody else? Maureen?
I'm curious if he has any siblings.
He does not.
Anybody else?
How is your empty nest?
It's going great. It's going great. We've gotten to see him a lot though, which is really nice.
How's he adjusting?
It's an adjustment. He's taken the bus home a couple of times. I was just telling someone right now, he wants to come home almost every weekend, but I'm hearing that from other families as well. And he's a freshman, yeah. Yeah, so it's really just been 6 weeks. It's not that long, but yeah. But it's a great school. We're very impressed with them, and fortunate that it's here in our state in only a couple hours. So yeah, it's good.
So again, now Saba has cards at the back, and Cindy and I were talking last time, because it just so happened that the 3 speakers last time were all certified in something, and so we wanted to really be sure that, you know, it's not about, like, the reason to share stories is that Saba, you see her whole journey, right? She needed this once herself, lived it with her son, and now she's done additional study and training, and now is sharing that vocation. But again, the sense of vocation, not a job, it's something that she deeply needed and wanted and experienced in her life. And I was telling Cindy about the fact that, because it's all, again, in our own time and timing, because probably about 7 or 8 years ago, do you ever find like a book in your bookshelf and you're like, where did this come from? So I start reading it and I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, so just devoured it. And it's called The Gift of Being Yourself. And I told my sister, I'm like, I found this book and da-da-da-da. And she said, I gave that to you 5 years ago.
How are we doing? Do we need to move?